The security guards escorting 58-year-old Henry Wallace to the CEO's office sent shockwaves through Patriot Assembly's factory floor. After 32 years of loyal service, the aging worker who'd spent months secretly building something in the abandoned storage room was finally caught. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Instead of being fired, this high school-educated machinist with calloused hands and oil-stained work shirts emerged as the savior of Haverford's largest employer, turned a failing production line into an industry breakthrough, and transformed from the shop floor's most ridiculed employee to the man whose name would soon appear on the company's patents, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary solutions come from the most overlooked minds. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, the morning shift at Patriot Assembly began like any other. The rhythmic clanking of machinery filled the cavernous production floor as Henry Wallace adjusted his safety goggles and carefully calibrated the assembly unit he'd operated for over 15 years. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, each motion deliberate and efficient. At 58, Henry was among the oldest workers at the factory, a living repository of manufacturing knowledge gained through decades of hands-on experience. The fluorescent lights flickered as a group of young men in pressed shirts and ties strode across the factory floor, clipboards in hand, their polished shoes impractical on the oil-spotted concrete. At their center walked Christopher Reed, the recently hired head engineer, his MIT degree and MBA frequently mentioned in company newsletters. "Efficiency analysis," muttered Harold Jenkins, the maintenance supervisor, appearing beside Henry. "Third one this month." Henry nodded, his focus remaining on his work. "Something's coming. Too many suits, too many closed-door meetings." "Reed's brought his entire team this time," Harold said, his voice lowered. "Rumor is they're looking at cutting the line." Christopher's group stopped at various stations, taking notes and speaking in hushed tones. When they reached Henry's workstation, the young engineer observed for several moments before addressing him. "Mr. Wallace, isn't it?" Christopher asked, consulting his clipboard. "Henry," he corrected, looking up briefly. Christopher gestured toward the assembly unit. "Your output numbers are consistently 15% below target for this station." Henry wiped his hands on a rag. "Machine needs recalibration. I've filed 3 maintenance requests." "The machine meets factory specifications," Christopher replied dismissively. "Perhaps a refresher training session would help." A younger worker at the next station snickered. Christopher and his team moved on, leaving Henry with clenched jaw and reddened ears. Harold placed a sympathetic hand on Henry's shoulder. "Don't let him get to you. That boy's been here, 6 months? You've forgotten more about these machines than he'll ever know." The morning break bell rang, and workers filed toward the small cafeteria. Henry lingered at his station, making minor adjustments to his machine with tools from his personal kit. Harold appeared again, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Town. A meeting tonight," Harold said, offering a cup to Henry. "Mayor's talking about economic development strategies, which means he's worried about the plant." Henry accepted the coffee gratefully. "Think we should be worried too." 36 years I've put in here," Harold sighed. "Used to be Haverford meant something in manufacturing. Now we're just another dying factory town." At lunch, Henry sat with his longtime friend and fellow worker, Peter Williams. The cafeteria buzzed with nervous conversation, workers huddled in groups, exchanging worried glances. Mary at reception overheard Henderson telling someone they're bringing in consultants next week, Peter said between bites of his sandwich. "Efficiency experts." Henry grimaced. "Never met an efficiency expert who knew the first thing about actually making things. My cousin in Pittsburgh said the same thing happened at his plant. 6 months later, half the workforce was gone. Production. Moved to Mexico? Before Henry could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Douglas Henderson, the CEO of Patriot Assembly, entered the cafeteria flanked by Christopher and several board members. The room fell silent as Henderson cleared his throat. "Good afternoon, everyone," Henderson began, his voice echoing in the quiet cafeteria. "I know there have been rumors circulating, and I want to address them directly. Patriot Assembly is facing significant challenges. Our production costs are 25% higher than our competitors, and our efficiency metrics are below industry standards." Workers exchanged nervous glances as Henderson continued. "I want to assure you that we're committed to maintaining operations in Haverford. That said, we need to make substantial changes to remain viable. Starting next week, consultants will be evaluating our processes to identify improvements." Christopher stepped forward. "We're implementing a modernization initiative. Some positions may be reconfigured as we update our systems and procedures." "Reconfigured," Henry muttered to Peter. "That's a fancy word for eliminated." Henderson concluded his announcement with forced optimism, but the tension in the room remained palpable. As the executives departed, conversations erupted throughout the cafeteria. Peter looked at Henry with concern. "What are we going to do?" Henry's gaze followed the departing executives. "Don't know about you, but I'm going to that town meeting tonight." The Haverford Community Center was packed that evening. Families, factory workers, and local business owners filled the folding chairs. Mayor Franklin Burns, a former patriot, Assembly employee himself, stood at the podium looking grave. "Folks, I won't sugarcoat this," the mayor began. "If Patriot Assembly cuts significant jobs, or God forbid closes entirely, Haverford faces an uncertain future. The factory accounts for 40% of our tax base and employs nearly a quarter of our workforce." From the third row, Henry watched the concerned faces around him. 3 seats away sat Julia Wallace, his daughter, her brow furrowed as she took notes. At 29, Julia taught industrial technology at Haverford Community College, her practical knowledge enhanced by formal education Henry had never been able to pursue. A local business owner stood. "What's the city doing to attract other employers?" "We're exploring options," Mayor Burns replied, "but manufacturing towns across the state are in the same boat. Companies are looking overseas, not at places like Haverford." Julia raised her hand and was acknowledged. "Has anyone consulted with the workers about efficiency improvements? My father's been at Patriot Assembly for 32 years, and he's identified numerous process improvements that management has ignored." Henry shifted uncomfortably as heads turned toward him. Mayor Burns nodded. "That's a valid point, Julia. Unfortunately, from what I understand, the company's bringing in outside consultants rather than leveraging internal expertise." After the meeting, Henry and Julia walked to the parking lot together. The evening air was cool, carrying the distant scent of the factory's industrial processes. "You shouldn't have mentioned me, Jules," Henry said. "Someone should," Julia replied, firmly. "You've been telling me for years about improvements they could make. Have you shown your ideas to the new engineer?" Henry laughed without humor. "Christopher Reed. He's got no time for suggestions from the floor. To him, I'm just an old man who never went to college, standing in the way of progress." "That's not fair, Dad. Your experience is valuable." "Not to them, it isn't. Education matters more than experience. These days." Julia stopped walking and turned to her father. "Then show them they're wrong. Mom always said you were the smartest person at that factory. She believed in you right up until the end." Henry's expression softened at the mention of his late wife. "Your mother had more faith in me than I deserved." "She had exactly the right amount of faith in you," Julia countered. "Remember what she always said? The people who say it can't be done shouldn't interrupt the people doing it." Henry smiled despite himself. "Linda had a way with words. The factory needs saving, Dad. Maybe instead of waiting for permission, you should just show them what you can do." The following morning, Henry arrived at work early. Instead of going directly to his station, he detoured to the factory's back storage area where discarded equipment accumulated before disposal. He surveyed the collection of abandoned machinery parts, conveyor segments, and obsolete control panels. Christopher Reed's voice startled him. "Looking for something, Mr. Wallace?" Henry turned to find the young engineer watching him with thinly veiled suspicion. "Just checking if there were any salvageable parts," Henry replied evenly. "Maintenance has been short on replacements." Christopher consulted his ever-present clipboard. "All replacement parts should come through official channels. We're implementing a new inventory control system next week." "Right," Henry nodded. "Wouldn't want to fix things too efficiently." Christopher's eyes narrowed. "I understand change can be difficult for senior employees, but these improvements are necessary for the company's survival. Been here through 3 necessary improvements already," Henry replied. "Funny how they always involve cutting the people who actually know how the place runs." The consultants, arriving tomorrow, have transformed dozens of struggling factories, Christopher said, his tone condescending. "They specialize in modernizing outdated operations." "And the workers who built this place, what happens to them?" Christopher's expression hardened. "That depends on their ability to adapt, Mr. Wallace. Now, I suggest you get to your station. The morning shift starts in 10 minutes. As Christopher walked away, Henry took one last look at the discarded equipment, his mind already calculating possibilities. During lunch, Henry approached Harold at their usual table, speaking quietly despite the cafeteria noise. "Need a favor, Harold. Access to the maintenance logs for the past 5 years." Harold raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of paperwork. What are you looking for?" "Patterns, breakdown frequencies, repair times, replacement parts. I've got an idea." "An idea that could get us both in trouble?" Harold asked, though his eyes showed interest rather than concern. "An idea that might save some jobs," Henry replied. "Maybe even the factory." Harold considered this, then nodded slowly. "I'll have them for you by end of shift. But Henry, be careful. Reed's got the ear of Henderson. He's dangerous." "So is doing nothing," Henry said firmly. That afternoon, the factory received its first visitors from the consulting firm. Men and women in expensive suits toured the facility, making notes and occasionally stopping workers to ask questions about their processes. Henry watched as they clustered around Christopher, nodding approvingly at whatever the young engineer was saying. One consultant, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached Henry's station. "Mind if I observe?" she asked, extending her hand. "Dr. Caroline Foster, Integrated Manufacturing Solutions." Henry shook her hand briefly before returning to his work. Free country. Dr. Foster watched as Henry operated his machine with practiced efficiency. "You've been here a while, I take it?" 32 years, Henry replied without looking up. "And in that time, what would you say is the biggest inefficiency in your process?" Henry paused, surprised by the question. Most consultants didn't ask the workers their opinions. "Communication," he said finally. "Left hand doesn't know what the right is doing. Engineers design processes without understanding the practical limitations. Management makes decisions without consulting the people who have to implement them." Dr. Foster made a note. "Interesting. Most workers mention equipment or scheduling issues." "Those are symptoms, not causes," Henry said, making a minute adjustment to his machine. "You want real efficiency? Start by listening to the people who do the work." Dr. Foster studied him with renewed interest. "I'd like to hear more of your thoughts, Mr. Wallace." Henry Wallace. "Well, Mr. Wallace, perhaps we could—" Christopher Reed appeared suddenly, interrupting their conversation. "Dr. Foster, we're ready for you in the conference room. The efficiency metrics presentation is about to begin." Dr. Foster nodded. "Of course." It was enlightening speaking with you, Mr. Wallace." As they walked away, Henry caught Christopher glancing back at him with undisguised suspicion. The message was clear: know your place. After his shift ended, Henry collected the maintenance logs from Harold and drove home to the small house he'd shared with his late wife. Sitting at the kitchen table, he spread out the documents and began methodically analyzing the information, making notes and sketches as patterns emerged. The doorbell rang, interrupting his concentration. Julia stood on the porch, holding a bag of takeout food. "Thought you might forget to eat," she said, stepping inside. "What's all this?" Henry gestured to the papers covering the table. "Maintenance records. I'm looking for inefficiency patterns." Julia set down the food and examined his notes. "You're mapping the entire production flow? Something's not right with the current setup. The machines break down in predictable patterns, but nobody's connecting the dots." Julia pulled up a chair. "Let me help. 2 pairs of eyes are better than 1. Father and daughter worked through the evening, analyzing data and discussing possibilities. As midnight approached, Henry leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. "It's the sequence," he said finally. "The way the line is configured creates vibration patterns that stress the components. If we reorganize the flow and added dampening systems, here and here," he pointed to his rough sketch, "we could reduce breakdowns by at least 40%. Julia studied his work. "This is brilliant, Dad. Have you shown this to anyone?" Henry shook his head. "Reed wouldn't listen, neither would Henderson." "So, what are you going to do?" Henry stared at his drawings, determination hardening in his eyes. "I'm going to build it." "Build what?" Julia asked, confused. "A prototype. A small-scale version of what the production line should be. Show them instead of telling them. With what materials? What space?" Henry smiled slightly. "You'd be amazed what people throw away at that factory. And the old storage room in Section D hasn't been used in years." Julia looked concerned. "Dad, if you get caught, then I get fired a few months earlier than planned." Henry shrugged. "But if it works..." Julia studied her father's face, seeing a spark that had been missing since her mother's death. "You'll need help," she said finally. "I can manage." "I didn't say you couldn't. I said you'll need help." Julia tapped one of his sketches. "And this control mechanism needs updating. I can help with that part." For the first time in months, Henry felt a flutter of hope. It was probably pointless, definitely risky, but what did he have to lose? The factory was changing, with or without him. At least this way, he'd go down fighting. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The following morning, Henry arrived at the factory an hour before his shift. He nodded to Marco Vasquez, the night janitor, finishing his rounds. Marco had worked at Patriot Assembly for 15 years, invisible to management but aware of everything that happened within its walls. "Early again, Mr. Wallace?" Marco asked, emptying a trash bin. "Just getting a head start," Henry replied casually. "Say, Marco, that storage room in Section D, is anyone using it these days?" Marco shook his head. "Not since they moved inventory to the new system." "Why do you ask?" "Been thinking it could use a cleanup. Probably all kinds of safety hazards. In there," Marco's eyes flickered with understanding. "Safety is important. I still have the key from when I used to store cleaning supplies there. Might have forgotten to return it to security." He reached into his pocket and discreetly passed a key to Henry. "Strange thing about that room. The security cameras there haven't worked since the roof leak last year. Maintenance list is so backed up, I doubt they'll get to it anytime soon." Henry pocketed the key. "Appreciate your concern for safety, Marco." "We look out for each other here," Marco replied with a slight nod. "The suits upstairs, they come and go, but people like us, we're Patriot Assembly." The factory floor gradually filled with workers as the shift start approached. Henry took his position at his station, working with methodical precision while his mind calculated what he would need for his project. Christopher Reed walked through with the efficiency consultants, pointing out various aspects of the production process. During his break, Henry slipped away to Section D, using Marco's key to access the forgotten storage room. Dust motes danced in the beams of light from small, grimy windows. Shelving units stood empty against the walls, and a heavy workbench occupied the center of the space. It wasn't much, but it would do. Henry spent his lunch break scavenging the scrap bins near maintenance, selecting discarded parts others had deemed worthless. Each piece went into his toolbox. A small motor from a decommissioned conveyor, control. Relays replaced during an upgrade, brackets and fasteners tossed aside during repairs. Planning a yard sale? Harold asked, appearing behind Henry at the scrap bin. Henry startled, then relaxed, seeing his old friend. Just seeing what might be. Useful? Harold glanced around to ensure they were alone. Got those additional maintenance records you wanted, efficiency reports from the Anderson line before they shut it down last year. You're taking a risk, Harold, Henry said, accepting the folder. 36 years here, and they've got some. Consultant fresh out of business school telling me how to do my job, Harold replied bitterly. Risk is all we've got left. Over the next 2 weeks, Henry established a routine. He would arrive early, work on his prototype before his shift, then return to it during breaks and after clocking out. Julia visited the factory twice, bringing control components she'd borrowed from the community college's workshop and helping refine his designs. The prototype gradually took shape, a miniaturized version of the factory's main production line with critical modifications. Henry's design rearranged the workflow sequence, incorporating dampening systems at key stress points and feedback mechanisms that adjusted to variations in materials. One evening, as Henry worked late in the storage room, the door opened unexpectedly. He froze, a wrench in hand, as Amanda Russell, Douglas Henderson's executive assistant, stood in the doorway. "Mr. Wallace?" she said, surprise evident in her voice. "What are you doing here after hours?" Henry straightened, mind racing. "Ms. Russell, I was just working on a personal project." Amanda stepped inside, her eyes taking in the half-built prototype. Using company equipment and space for personal projects is against policy. "It's all discarded material," Henry explained. "Stuff headed for the dumpster." Amanda approached the workbench, studying the intricate arrangement of components. "This looks like a production line model." Henry hesitated, then decided truth was his only option. "It's a redesign of our current system, more efficient, fewer breakdowns." "You're designing a new production system?" Amanda's tone was incredulous. "Does Mr. Reed know about this?" "Mr. Reed isn't interested in ideas from the floor," Henry replied, an edge in his voice. "But this could save jobs, maybe even the factory." Amanda circled the prototype, genuine curiosity replacing her initial suspicion. "My father worked the line at Sterling Manufacturing for 20 years. He always said management didn't understand what really happened on the floor." She turned to Henry. "I won't report this, Mr. Wallace, but you're taking a significant risk." "Sometimes risks are necessary, Ms. Russell." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "You might be right about that." Patriot. "Assembly needs something to change. The board meeting yesterday, it wasn't encouraging." After she left, Henry sat heavily on a stool, adrenaline still coursing through him. He dodged a bullet, but Amanda's words about the board meeting reinforced the urgency of his project. Next morning, emergency maintenance on Henry's regular machine forced a temporary reassignment. He found himself working alongside Peter in the assembly section, where the enormous mechanical presses shaped metal components with thunderous force. Consultants were here again yesterday, Peter said over the noise, timing everything with stopwatches like we're in some kind of race. What have they recommended so far? Henry asked. Cutting the quality control team in half, for starters. Outsourcing component manufacturing to Mexico, the usual corporate playbook. Henry watched the massive press descend with precise timing. And Reed, practically attached to the lead consultant's hip. Word is, he's positioning himself for a promotion when they restructure. During lunch, Henry noticed Dr. Foster sitting alone, reviewing documents. After a moment's hesitation, he approached her table. Mind if I join you? She looked up, recognition dawning. Mr. Wallace, please, sit. Henry placed his lunch tray down. How's the efficiency evaluation coming along? Officially, I couldn't comment, she replied, closing her folder. Unofficially, I've seen better organized high school science projects than this factory's workflow. Henry couldn't help but smile. Tell me something I don't know. Your head engineer has impressive credentials, but limited practical understanding. He's recommending solutions that look good on paper, but won't work in reality. And your recommendation? Doctor. Foster studied him. My job is to evaluate, not recommend. But if I were in charge, I'd start by asking the people who've been running these machines for decades what they think. Henry took a risk. And if one of those people had already designed a solution? Dr. Foster leaned forward. I'd be extremely interested in seeing it. Before Henry could respond, Christopher approached their table. Dr. Foster, we're ready for the afternoon session, he announced, eyeing Henry suspiciously. Of course, she replied, gathering her materials. Thank you for the conversation, Mr. Wallace. After they departed, Henry noticed Amanda watching from across the cafeteria, her expression thoughtful. That evening, Henry encountered Marco outside the storage room. 2 maintenance men were asking about this area today, Marco warned. Said they needed to check electrical systems. Henry's stomach tightened. Did they come in? No. I told them the room was being used for temporary storage of cleaning chemicals. Hazardous materials, very dangerous. Marco's eyes twinkled. They decided the electrical inspection could wait. Thank you, Henry said sincerely. Marco shrugged. My brother-in-law lost his job when Westfield Tools closed last year. 23 years of experience thrown away like garbage. His family had to move to Pittsburgh for work. He looked directly at Henry. Whatever you're doing in there, I hope it helps. Later that night, Julia arrived with circuit components for the control system. I ran simulations using the factory. Specifications you gave me, she explained, connecting wires to the prototype. This should improve response time by about 30%. Henry watched his daughter work, pride warming his chest. You could have been an engineer, you know, a real one, with the degree and everything. Julia paused, looking up at him. I'm a real engineer, Dad. Different path, same destination. You know what I mean. You're smart enough. Smart enough isn't the same as able to afford it, she replied without bitterness. Besides, I love teaching. Seeing students connect theory with practice, that's worth more than any corporate salary. They worked in companionable silence until Julia spoke again. Mom would be proud of you for doing this. Henry's hands stilled momentarily. She always believed in standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult, Julia corrected, adjusting a connection. Remember how she organized that fundraiser for Mr. Daniels when he got sick? Everyone said it couldn't be done in time, but she proved them wrong. Your mother was the strongest person I've ever known, Henry said softly, until the very end. Julia reached across the workbench and squeezed her father's hand. She passed that strength to you, and to me. As weeks passed, Henry's prototype neared completion. The miniature production line demonstrated his redesigned workflow with clear efficiency improvements, but he still needed to document the results to make his case convincingly. During this period, changes at the factory accelerated. 5 administrative positions were eliminated, and rumors swirled about upcoming cuts to the production staff. Christopher Reed became increasingly visible, leading tours for potential investors and speaking about modernization initiatives in company-wide emails. One afternoon, as Henry calibrated sensors on his prototype, the storage room door opened. Dr. Foster stood in the entrance, alone. "So this is where you disappear to during breaks," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Your executive assistant friend mentioned I might find something interesting here." Henry straightened, surprised. "Amanda told you about this?" "Not directly. Let's say she pointed me in the right direction." Dr. Foster approached the workbench, examining the prototype with professional interest. "This is impressive craftsmanship, Mr. Wallace. It's a more efficient configuration of our current system," Henry explained, moving beside her. "The main problem is vibrational harmonics in the current setup. One machine's vibrations amplify another's, creating stress points and premature component failures." Dr. Foster nodded, understanding immediately. "And your solution? Reorganized workflow sequence with dampening systems at critical junctions, plus a feedback mechanism that adjusts to material variables in real time." Henry activated the prototype, and the miniature production line hummed to life, components moving in synchronized precision. Dr. Foster observed silently, occasionally asking technical questions that Henry answered with confidence born from decades of experience. After 15 minutes, she stepped back. "Do you have documentation, efficiency projections, cost analyses, implementation timelines?" "Some," Henry replied. "My daughters helped with the technical specifications, but I don't have the software. For proper financial projections, you need data to make your case," Dr. Foster said, "empirical evidence that this configuration outperforms the current system. That would require testing at scale. I don't have access to that kind of equipment." Dr. Foster considered this. "What if you did?" Henry studied her, uncertain of her meaning. "How?" "The night shift is running at minimal capacity this week. There's an auxiliary line not currently in use. With the right clearance, you could set up a limited test environment." Henry shook his head in disbelief. "Why would you help me? Isn't your job to recommend staff reductions?" "My job is to identify the most efficient operational model for this facility," she corrected. "If that happens to be designed by a line worker rather than an MIT graduate, so be it." Before Henry could respond, they heard voices approaching in the corridor outside. Dr. Foster quickly moved to the door. "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., Bay 7. I'll arrange temporary access," she whispered. "And Mr. Wallace, bring documentation. Everything. You have..." After she departed, Henry sat in stunned silence. For the first time, someone with actual authority was taking his ideas seriously. He immediately called Julia to share the news and ask for her help, preparing the necessary documentation. The next day passed in anxious anticipation. Henry performed his regular duties while mentally rehearsing his explanation of the system. During his lunch break, he noticed Christopher and Douglas Henderson in intense conversation near the offices, occasionally glancing in his direction. His unease grew when Amanda failed to acknowledge him as she hurried past with an armload of files. After his shift ended, Henry went home to collect his documentation and change clothes before returning for the evening meeting. As he pulled into his driveway, he was surprised to find Julia waiting on the porch. "What's wrong?" he asked, seeing her worried expression. "Dad, someone from HR called the college looking for me today. They were asking questions about whether I'd removed any equipment from the engineering lab." Henry's stomach dropped. "What? Did you tell them that anything I borrowed was properly signed out for teaching purposes, which is true?" Julia followed him inside. "But it feels like they're building a case against you, Dad. Looking for reasons to discredit your work or fire you for policy violations." Henry placed his documentation on the kitchen table. Dr. Foster is giving me a chance to test the system tonight. If it works, none of that will matter. And if it doesn't, or if it's some kind of trap? Henry sighed, rubbing his temples. Then, I'll have tried, Jules. Can't do more than that. Julia studied her father, then nodded. I'm coming with you. It's too risky. If this goes badly, then we both go down fighting, she interrupted. Mom would expect nothing less. Henry smiled despite his worry. You are so much like her. That evening, they arrived at Patriot Assembly together. The night shift security guard recognized Henry and waved them through with minimal questions. Bay 7, normally bustling with activity, stood quiet and dark, except for lights above a single production line. Dr. Foster waited beside the control panel, clipboard in hand. She raised an eyebrow at Julia's presence, but made no comment. Mr. Wallace, I've cleared this area for 4 hours of testing, she explained. The system has been reset to standard factory configurations. Show me what your redesign can do. For the next 2 hours, Henry and Julia worked methodically, applying his modifications to the production line while Dr. Foster observed and took notes. They installed dampening components at stress points, reconfigured the workflow sequence, and implemented the feedback mechanism Julia had designed. Ready for the test run, Henry announced finally, wiping sweat from his brow. Dr. Foster handed him a clipboard. Initial specifications. We'll measure performance against these benchmarks. Henry activated the system, and the production line hummed to life. Julia monitored the feedback sensors while Henry watched for mechanical issues. The three of them observed in tense silence as the line processed test materials. After 30 minutes, Dr. Foster checked the output data, her expression carefully neutral. Interesting. Let's push it to maximum capacity and see if the improvements hold. They increased the production rate gradually, pushing the system harder than the standard configuration would typically allow. When they reached maximum capacity, Henry held his breath, watching for signs of stress or failure. The production line continued to operate smoothly, efficiently processing materials at a rate Henry knew exceeded standard performance by a significant margin. Dr. Foster made final notes, then looked up at Henry and Julia. 23% increase in throughput, 47% reduction in mechanical stress markers, estimated reduction in breakdown frequency. She paused, double-checking her figures. Approximately 65%. Julia broke into a wide smile. It works! Dad, it actually works at scale! Henry felt lightheaded with relief. The months of secret work, the risk, the doubt, all validated in a single moment. Dr. Foster's professional demeanor softened slightly. This is exceptional work, Mr. Wallace, genuinely innovative. What happens now? Henry asked. Now I complete my report with these new findings, Dr. Foster replied. The data speaks for itself. As they began resetting the production line to its original configuration, the overhead lights suddenly blazed to full brightness. Douglas Henderson stood in the doorway, Christopher Reed and 2 security guards at his side. Dr. Foster, Henderson said coldly, I don't recall authorizing tests outside the established evaluation parameters. Mr. Henderson, she replied evenly, I was pursuing a promising efficiency solution. Henderson's gaze shifted to Henry and Julia. And I certainly don't recall authorizing non-engineering personnel to modify production equipment. Sir, if you'll look at the results, Henry began. What I see, Mr. Wallace, is a clear violation of company policy, Henderson interrupted. Unauthorized access to production equipment, tampering with factory systems, bringing an outsider into a secure facility. He turned to the security guards. Please escort Mr. Wallace and his daughter from the premises. Mr. Wallace's employment status will be addressed in the morning. Christopher stepped forward, barely concealing his satisfaction. "I'll reset the system and assess any damage to the equipment." "That won't be necessary," Dr. Foster interjected. "We've already documented the test results and are in the process of restoring the original configuration." Henderson regarded her coldly. "Dr. Foster, I expected better judgment from your firm. We'll be discussing this breach of protocol with your superiors tomorrow." As the security guards approached, Henry felt a strange sense of calm descend. He'd known the risks from the beginning. At least he'd had the chance to prove his concept. "It worked, Mr. Henderson," he said firmly, gathering his documentation. "Before I go, you should know this system could save Patriot Assembly millions in reduced downtime and increased output." "I'll take that under advisement," Henderson replied dismissively. "Security will escort you out now." As they were led through the factory, workers from the night shift watched in confusion. Henry kept his head high, refusing to show defeat. Julia walked beside him, her expression a mixture of anger and pride. Outside in the parking lot, free from security's presence, Julia turned to her father. "This isn't over, Dad. The test worked. The data proves it." Henry stared back at the factory, its illuminated windows glowing in the night. "Maybe, but I doubt Henderson will even look at the results." "Then we make him look," Julia said determinedly. "There's more than one way to fight this battle." Henry nodded slowly, his mind already calculating a new approach. Henderson might control access to the factory, but he didn't control everything. "You're right, Jules. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." The drive home passed in tense silence. Henry's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white under the passing streetlights. At a red light, he glanced at Julia, who was already typing rapidly on her phone. "Who are you messaging at this hour?" he asked. "Professor Dawson from the engineering department," Julia replied without looking up. "He has connections on the Haverford Industrial Council. If Henderson won't listen to the data, maybe others will." The light turned green, and Henry accelerated through the empty intersection. "Jules, this isn't your fight. You've already risked enough." "Actually, it is my fight," she countered firmly. "That factory supported our family my entire life. It paid for Mom's treatments, my education, everything. I won't watch it collapse because of corporate stubbornness." Henry took a deep breath, about to argue further when his phone rang through the car speakers. Harold's name appeared on the display. "Henry, where are you?" Harold's voice sounded urgent. "Heading home. Henderson caught us testing the system. Looks like I'm fired." "It's worse than that," Harold said grimly. "Reed's telling everyone you tried to sabotage the production line. They're changing the locks and security codes tonight." Henry exchanged a startled look with Julia. "Sabotage? That's absurd." "Doesn't matter. He's spinning it his way, and Henderson's backing him. But listen, that's not why I called. Dr. Foster is in the conference room right now with Henderson. Heated argument. I can't hear everything, but she's defending you." A flicker of hope sparked in Henry's chest. "Any idea what's happening?" "No, but she's pulled out all her data and reports. Amanda's in there taking notes, looking pretty uncomfortable. I'll call when I know more." After they hung up, Julia touched her father's arm. "See? Dr. Foster saw the results. She knows your system. Works." "Henderson won't care," Henry muttered. His mind was made up before he even saw the test. "Then we need someone whose opinion he does care about." When they arrived home, Julia immediately set up her laptop at the kitchen table. Henry watched as she organized the test data and began creating presentation slides with efficiency comparisons. "What exactly are you planning?" he asked. "Making our case in language business people understand. Numbers, projections, and bottom-line impact." Julia typed furiously. "If Henderson thinks this is just about saving jobs, he won't care. But if we show how your system affects profitability..." Henry sat heavily in a chair. "Even if you put together the most convincing presentation in history..." Who's going to see it? I'm banned from the factory, and Henderson certainly won't grant us a meeting. We present it to someone with influence over Henderson. Julia looked up from her screen. The Haverford Industrial Council meets tomorrow morning. Mayor Burns will be there, along with representatives from regional banks and investors who have stakes in local manufacturing. And Professor Dawson can get us in? He's presenting a workforce development report. Says he can give us 10 minutes at the end of his segment. Julia hesitated. There's one more thing. I think we should call Michael. Henry frowned at the mention of his son. Why involve your brother in this mess? Because he's an accountant with Delaney Financial in Pittsburgh, and they handle pension fund investments for 3 council members. Julia held her father's gaze. We need all the help we can get, Dad. Before Henry could respond, his phone rang again. This time it was Marco Vasquez. Mr. Wallace, I only have a minute, Marco said quietly. They're locking down the storage room. Dr. Foster tried to stop them, but Reed is personally supervising. They're confiscating your prototype. Henry closed his eyes briefly. Thanks for letting me know, Marco. There's more. I overheard Reed telling security that he wants the prototype and all your materials documented as evidence of attempted industrial espionage. He's building a case against you, Mr. Wallace. After the call ended, Henry shared the news with Julia, who looked both outraged and determined. They're trying to discredit you completely, she said. Make it seem like you weren't improving the system, but trying to damage it. Without the prototype is just my word against Reed's. Not exactly, Julia replied, reaching for a USB drive in her bag. I backed up all our test data from tonight, including the baseline measurements and improvement metrics. Dr. Foster's clipboard had a digital recording component. The data transferred automatically. Henry couldn't help smiling slightly. Your mother always said you were the smart one. The remainder of the night passed in focused preparation. Henry called Michael, swallowing his pride to ask for his son's help. Julia refined their presentation, incorporating production data and financial projections. By dawn, they had assembled a compelling case for Henry's automation system. At 7:30 a.m., Henry's phone rang. It was Harold, his voice hushed. Henry, something big is happening. Henderson called an emergency meeting with all floor supervisors and engineers for 9 a.m. Reed's running around like his tie's on fire, gathering documentation about production costs. Any idea what it's about? Not sure, but Amanda let slip that. Henderson got a call from someone on the board at 6 a.m. Whatever was said has the entire executive floor scrambling. After hanging up, Henry turned to Julia, who was adjusting her blazer in the hallway mirror. Ready for this? He asked. She nodded, her expression resolute. More than ready. The Haverford Community Center was bustling with activity when they arrived. The Industrial Council meeting had drawn a larger crowd than usual, with factory workers, business owners, and concerned citizens filling the available seats. Professor Dawson, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, met them at the side entrance. Julia, Mr. Wallace, I've arranged for your presentation to follow my workforce report. 10 minutes as promised. Thank you, Professor, Julia replied, handing him a thumb drive with their slides. I should warn you, Dawson continued, lowering his voice. Douglas Henderson called this morning asking to extend his segment. Something about a critical announcement regarding Patriot Assembly's future. He's bringing his executive team. Henry's stomach tightened. This couldn't be coincidence. When is his segment? Directly after yours, Dawson replied. Inside the meeting room, Henry spotted familiar faces among the attendees. Harold sat near the back, giving him a subtle nod. Marco. Vasquez stood against the wall, having apparently come directly from his night shift. To Henry's surprise, Dr. Foster was also present, seated toward the front with a leather portfolio on her lap. Mayor Burns opened the meeting with standard announcements before turning the floor over to the first scheduled speakers. Henry paid little attention, mentally rehearsing what he would say when his turn came. Halfway through Professor Dawson's presentation on workforce development, the side door opened. Douglas Henderson entered, followed by Christopher Reed and several board members from Patriot Assembly. They took seats in the reserved front row, Henderson glancing around the room with the confident air of a man about to deliver important news. "And now," Professor Dawson concluded, "I'd like to introduce Julia Wallace, an instructor at Haverford Community College, and her father, Henry Wallace, a longtime employee of Patriot Assembly. They'll be presenting an innovative manufacturing solution developed right here in Haverford." As Henry and Julia approached the podium, murmurs rippled through the audience. Henderson straightened in his seat, his expression darkening with recognition. Christopher leaned over to whisper something, but Henderson silenced him with a sharp gesture. Julia spoke first, her voice steady and professional. "Good morning. We're here to present an automation system that could significantly improve manufacturing efficiency at Patriot Assembly and potentially serve as a model for other facilities in the region." She launched into a concise overview of the current production challenges, illustrating her points with clear graphs showing breakdown frequencies and maintenance costs. Henry watched the council members' faces, noting their growing interest. As Julia translated complex technical issues into financial terms they understood. "I'll now turn the presentation over to my father, who developed this system based on his 32 years of experience on the factory floor," Julia said, stepping aside. Henry moved to the podium, conscious of Henderson's cold stare. "I'm not an engineer with fancy degrees," he began honestly. "I'm a line worker who's operated, maintained, and repaired Patriot Assembly's machines for over 3 decades. During that time, I've observed patterns and problems that aren't visible from management offices or consultant reports." He clicked to the next slide, showing his redesigned production system. "This configuration addresses the fundamental issue with our current setup, vibrational harmonics that create cumulative stress on components." As Henry explained the technical aspects of his design, he noticed Henderson checking his watch impatiently. Christopher Reed's expression had transformed from dismissive to concerned as the presentation progressed. "Last night, we tested this system on Patriot Assembly's auxiliary production line," Henry continued, clicking to the results slide. "The data shows a 23% increase in throughput, 47% reduction in mechanical stress, and a projected 65% decrease in breakdown frequency." A council member leaned forward. "Those are impressive numbers, Mr. Wallace. Have they been verified?" Before Henry could answer, Dr. Foster stood. "I supervise the testing personally. As lead consultant for integrated manufacturing solutions, I can confirm these figures are accurate and the methodology was sound." Henderson rose halfway out of his seat. "Dr. Foster, may I remind you of your confidentiality agreement, which specifically exempts me from withholding information relevant to client viability?" She replied calmly. "This solution is directly relevant." Julia stepped forward again. "Based on these efficiency improvements, we project annual savings of approximately $3.2 million in reduced maintenance costs and increased production capacity. The implementation cost would be recouped within 7 months. The final slide displayed a striking comparison. Current operating costs versus projected costs with Henry's system implemented. The difference was dramatic enough to elicit murmurs from the council members. "Thank you for your attention," Julia concluded. "We welcome your questions." A silver-haired woman on the council spoke first. "Mr. Wallace, this system is quite innovative. Why wasn't it developed through proper channels within Patriot Assembly?" Henry paused, choosing his words carefully. "I attempted to present my observations through established procedures, but found limited interest in ideas from production staff. Eventually, I decided to develop a working prototype to demonstrate its viability." "A prototype you assembled without Authorization using company materials. Christopher interjected loudly from his seat. Using discarded materials destined for scrap, Henry corrected. Nothing of value was taken or misused. Mayor Burns frowned. Mr. Reed, you'll have your turn during Patriot Assembly's segment. Please allow the council to ask its questions. Another council member, a man in his 60s with a banker's conservative suit, leaned forward. Mr. Wallace, what prompted you to bring this directly to the Industrial Council rather than working within company channels? Henry hesitated, aware that his answer could determine how the council received his proposal. Julia touched his arm reassuringly. Truth is, sir, I was escorted from the factory last night after the successful test. Mr. Henderson deemed the unauthorized testing a violation of company policy, regardless of the results. Henry met Henderson's gaze directly. With Patriot Assembly facing potential layoffs or closure, I couldn't let promising solution go unexplored because of procedural concerns. The banker nodded thoughtfully. And what exactly are you asking of this council? Nothing for myself, Henry replied honestly, but I'm asking you to recognize that this system could help keep Patriot Assembly viable and preserve hundreds of jobs in Haverford. How that happens is beyond my control. As the questioning concluded, Mayor Burns thanked Henry and Julia before calling Douglas Henderson for Patriot Assembly's segment. Henderson approached the podium with practiced authority, adjusting the microphone with manicured fingers. Thank you, Mayor Burns, council members. I had prepared remarks regarding our ongoing efficiency initiatives, but in light of this unusual presentation, I feel compelled to address several points. Henderson cast a disapproving glance toward Henry. While Mr. Wallace's creativity is noteworthy, his methods were completely inappropriate. Tampering with production equipment, conducting unauthorized tests, these actions could have damaged valuable machinery or even created safety hazards. Dr. Foster shook her head slightly, but remained seated. Furthermore, Henderson continued, the projected savings Mr. Wallace presented are speculative at best. Our engineering team, led by Christopher Reed, has already evaluated numerous efficiency measures. Excuse me, Douglas, interrupted a distinguished man in the front row who hadn't spoken previously. He turned to face the council. William Harrington, Patriot Assembly Board Chairman. I believe I can add some context here. Henderson appeared startled as his boss rose to address the room. Last night, Harrington continued, I received a detailed report from Dr. Foster regarding an innovative production system developed by one of our employees. The efficiency gains she documented were significant enough that I requested an emergency review by our technical team in Pittsburgh. He opened a folder he'd been carrying. Their assessment, completed at 4 a.m., confirms the viability of Mr. Wallace's design. In fact, their projected savings exceed even his conservative estimates. Henry exchanged a shocked glance with Julia. This was unexpected. Harrington turned toward Henderson. Douglas, I understand your concerns about protocol. However, the board's primary responsibility is to company viability and shareholder value. This innovation represents a significant opportunity that we cannot ignore due to procedural issues. Henderson's complexion had paled noticeably. Sir, I was simply following established security protocols when you removed a valuable employee and potential company-saving innovation from the premises, Harrington asked dryly. Yes, we'll discuss your judgment on that matter privately. The chairman addressed the council again. Patriot Assembly has been part of Haverford for generations. My grandfather opened this factory in 1952 and we've weathered many challenges since then. The current economic pressures are substantial, but innovations like Mr. Wallace's remind us that solutions often come from unexpected sources. Harrington walked over to where Henry sat and extended his hand. Mr. Wallace, on behalf of the Patriot Assembly Board, I'd like to formally acknowledge your contribution and invite you to implement your system factory-wide with appropriate compensation and recognition. Henry rose slowly, aware that every eye in the room was watching as he shook Harrington's hand. "Thank you, sir. I just want to see the factory succeed." "And so it shall," Harrington assured him. "With proper implementation of your system, not only can we avoid the planned workforce reductions, but we may actually need to expand certain departments to accommodate increased production capacity." A ripple of approval moved through the audience, particularly among the Patriot Assembly workers present. Harold gave Henry a thumbs up from his seat. Mayor Burns leaned into his microphone. "This is precisely the kind of innovation and cooperation we need to keep manufacturing alive in communities like Haverford. I think we can all agree this represents a positive development for our town's economic future." As the meeting continued, Julia squeezed her father's hand underneath the table. "You did it, Dad," she whispered. "We did it," he corrected softly. When the council meeting adjourned, Henry found himself surrounded by well-wishers and curious questioners. Harold pushed through the crowd to clap him on the shoulder. "Never doubted you for a minute," Harold grinned. "Though I admit I didn't expect the board chairman himself to show up and overrule Henderson. That was something to see." Dr. Foster approached next, offering a professional handshake. "Impressive presentation, Mr. Wallace. Clear, data-driven, and compelling. Thank you for verifying the test results," Henry replied. "Without your credibility behind the data, this might have gone very differently." "Credit where it's due," she responded with a slight smile. "Though I admit I've never had a client quite so dramatically reject my advice only to have their board chairman countermand them publicly." As people began dispersing, Henry noticed Douglas Henderson and Christopher Reed exiting quickly through a side door, their body language tense. Amanda Russell remained behind, approaching Henry hesitantly. "Mr. Wallace, Mr. Harrington would like to speak with you privately when you have a moment," she said, her formal tone belied by the genuine smile she couldn't quite suppress. Henry nodded. "Of course, I'm available whenever he is." He's suggested breakfast tomorrow morning at his home to discuss implementation details. She handed him a business card with an address written on the back. 7:30 a.m., if that works for you. After Amanda departed, Julia rejoined her father, Michael now beside her. Henry's son, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of his life in Pittsburgh's financial sector, gave his father an awkward but sincere hug. "Sorry I missed your presentation," Michael said. "My meeting with Councilman Phillips ran long." "You helped get us the opportunity," Henry replied. "That's what mattered." Julia looked between them hopefully. "Should we celebrate? Maybe breakfast at Diane's diner like we used to." Henry shook his head, a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration washing over him. "Tomorrow, maybe. Right now, I think I need to process everything that just happened." As they walked out of the community center together, Henry paused to look back at the dispersing crowd, workers, business leaders, and townspeople united momentarily by the promise of a factory saved and jobs preserved. "Dad?" Julia prompted, gently. "Just thinking," Henry replied, turning to his children. "Your mother always said perseverance matters more than permission." Michael nodded. "She was usually right." "Usually?" Julia laughed. "Always." Henry smiled, feeling Linda's presence, among them more strongly than he had in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, implementing the system, navigating corporate politics, perhaps even defending his innovation from those who still doubted. But today, just for this moment, victory tasted remarkably sweet. Henry woke before his alarm, the grey dawn light barely filtering through his bedroom curtains. Sleep had come fitfully, his mind racing with ideas for implementing his system, concerns about potential obstacles, and lingering disbelief at yesterday's dramatic reversal of fortune. He dressed carefully in his best shirt and slacks, clothes usually reserved for holidays and funerals, and studied his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at him seemed somehow different, the eyes more focused, the perpetual worry lines around his mouth less pronounced. The Harrington estate stood on the wooded outskirts of Haverford, a colonial-style home set back from the road behind a tasteful stone wall. As Henry's truck crunched up the gravel driveway, he felt acutely aware of the vehicle's rusted fender and the patch of primer paint on the driver's door. He parked beside a gleaming black luxury sedan and took a deep breath before approaching the front entrance. William Harrington answered the door personally, dressed casually in a sweater and slacks that Henry suspected cost more than his entire wardrobe. "Henry, right on time, come in." Harrington's handshake was firm, his manner direct but not unfriendly. "Coffee's ready in the sunroom. My wife's visiting our daughter in Boston, so we have the place to ourselves." Henry followed him through the impressive home, noting family photographs spanning generations. One sepia-toned image showed a much younger man standing proudly before a newly constructed building, the original Patriot Assembly Facility. "My grandfather," Harrington explained, noticing Henry's interest. "Samuel Harrington, 1952, started with 12 employees making agricultural equipment components. By the time my father took over in 1974, we had 300 workers and contracts with major manufacturers across the Northeast." The sunroom overlooked manicured gardens, morning light streaming through large windows. A breakfast spread waited on a round table, fresh fruit, pastries, and a French press coffee service. "Help yourself," Harrington said, pouring coffee into fine china cups. "I imagine yesterday was quite a day for you." Henry accepted the coffee gratefully. "Still processing it, to be honest, sir." "William, please." Harrington seated himself across from Henry. "I've reviewed Dr. Foster's complete report, as well as the technical assessment from our engineering division. Your system is genuinely innovative, Henry. The question now is implementation." Henry nodded, sipping his coffee. "I've been thinking about a phased approach. Start with line 3, which has the highest breakdown rate, then expand to the remaining lines once we've worked out any issues." "Practical, I like that." Harrington made a note on a small leather-bound notebook. "What resources will you need?" "Access to maintenance records, downtime logs, parts inventory, a small team of workers familiar with the existing system, 2 weeks to install the modifications and test the results on line 3. Harrington studied him thoughtfully. "You mentioned your daughter helped with the control systems. Would you want her involved?" "Julia has classes to teach, but she's offered to consult on the electronic components during her off hours. We should compensate her properly for that expertise." Harrington leaned back in his chair. "There's something else we need to discuss, Henry. Your position at Patriot Assembly moving forward." Henry tensed slightly. Despite yesterday's events, he remained acutely aware of his vulnerable status. Harrington continued, "Your current role doesn't reflect the value you clearly bring to the company. I'm creating a new position, Director of Production Innovation, reporting directly to me. The role comes with appropriate compensation and authority to implement efficiency improvements across all our production systems." Henry set down his coffee cup carefully, stunned. "Sir, William, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for a director-level position. I don't have a college degree or management experience. You have something more valuable, proven ability to solve complex problems that degreed engineers missed." Harrington's tone was matter-of-fact. "Besides, you'll have support. I'm assembling a team structure that leverages your practical knowledge while providing the administrative backing you'll need." "What about Henderson and Reed?" Harrington's Expression hardened slightly. Henderson will remain CEO, focusing on sales, client relations, and financial management, areas where his skills are valuable. Reed will continue as head engineer, but with a revised mandate to collaborate with your innovation team. Henry considered this carefully. Working alongside Henderson and Reed after everything that had happened would be challenging, to say the least. I can see your concern, Harrington acknowledged. But remember, in business, success is the ultimate vindication. Implement your system successfully, and their objections become irrelevant. After breakfast, Harrington gave Henry a tour of his home office, where engineering diagrams from 3 generations of Harringtons lined the walls. Harrington pointed to a framed patent document. My father's biggest innovation, a hydraulic control system that became industry standard in the 70s. He wasn't formally trained either, just understood the practical limitations of existing systems. Henry examined the document with interest. Must run in the family. Perhaps, Harrington smiled slightly, though my MBA professors might disagree. Now, shall we discuss your compensation package? Later that morning, Henry drove directly to Harold's house, his head still spinning from the meeting with Harrington. Harold was in his driveway, tinkering with a vintage motorcycle, when Henry pulled up. There he is, Harold called out, wiping his hands on a rag. The man of the hour. How was breakfast with the chairman? Henry leaned against his truck, shaking his head in disbelief. He offered me a director position, created it specifically for me. Harold whistled. Director of what? Production innovation, reporting directly to him, not Henderson. Well, I'll be damned. Harold abandoned his motorcycle to give Henry a congratulatory slap on the back. After all these years of being ignored, you're finally getting your due. It doesn't feel quite real, Henry admitted. Yesterday morning I thought I was getting fired. Now I'm discussing salary packages and department budgets. Believe it, my friend. Harold's expression turned serious. You earned this, not just with your innovation, but with 32 years of showing up, doing the work, and caring about quality when others didn't. By Monday morning, news of Henry's promotion had spread throughout Patriot Assembly. As he walked through the main entrance, using the front door for the first time in his career rather than the employee side entrance, he felt the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations. Amanda Russell met him in the lobby, professional and poised. Good morning, Mr. Wallace. Your office is ready, and Mr. Harrington has scheduled a department head meeting at 10 cells to introduce your new role. Henry followed her to the executive floor, feeling out of place despite his pressed shirt and new tie, a hastily purchased addition to his wardrobe. The office she led him to was modest by executive standards, but palatial compared to the break. Room lockers he'd used for 3 decades. Large windows overlooked the production floor, providing a clear view of the machinery he knew so intimately. Your team will assemble here at 11:30, Amanda explained, handing him a folder. These files contain the implementation plan Mr. Harrington approved, along with profiles of the team members assigned to your department. After she departed, Henry sat at his new desk, feeling like an imposter. The leather chair, the computer, the credenza with its neatly arranged supplies, everything spoke of a world fundamentally different from the factory floor he'd inhabited for his entire career. A knock at the open door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Foster stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand. Congratulations on the promotion, she said, entering at his gesture. Well deserved. Thank you for your support, Henry replied. Without your verification of the test results, none of this would have happened. I recognize genuine innovation when I see it. She set her briefcase on a chair. I'm here to discuss the implementation phase. My firm has been retained to document the process and results for potential application at other facilities. Henry raised an eyebrow. Other facilities? Patriot Assembly is one of 17 manufacturing operations in the Harrington Group's portfolio. If your system proves as effective as projected, they plan to implement variations across all compatible production environments. The scope of potential impact hadn't occurred to Henry until that moment. His solution, born from decades of hands-on experience and months of after-hours work, might eventually affect thousands of jobs across multiple states. At 10 sharp, Henry entered the main conference room for the department head meeting. Douglas Henderson sat at the head of the table with Christopher Reed and other executives. Arranged around it, Henderson's smile appeared forced as he gestured to an empty chair. "Henry, please join us. We were just discussing the organizational changes Mr. Harrington announced this morning." Henry took the offered seat, conscious of the mixed reactions around the table. Some executives nodded respectfully. Others, particularly those aligned with Henderson, maintained careful neutrality. "As I was saying," Henderson continued, "Henry will be leading our new production innovation department, focusing initially on implementing his efficiency system on line 3. Mr. Harrington has emphasized this project's priority, so all departments are expected to provide necessary support." "Christopher," Reed cleared his throat, "I've taken the liberty of reviewing the preliminary plans. While innovative, there are several technical considerations that may require adjustment." "Reed," Henderson interrupted sharply, "Mr. Harrington was quite clear about your role. You're to provide technical support as requested, not redirect. The implementation." The rebuke was unexpected, given Henderson's previous alignment with Reed. Henry realized the CEO was adjusting to new political realities within the company hierarchy. After the meeting, Henderson asked Henry to remain behind. When they were alone, the CEO's professional veneer slipped slightly. "I want to be perfectly clear, Wallace. Harrington may have created this position for you, but I'm still running this company. Your little invention might have impressed the board, but success requires more than clever mechanical tricks." Henry met his gaze steadily. "I'm not interested in company politics, Mr. Henderson. I just want to improve the production systems." "Noble," Henderson replied skeptically. "Just remember that innovations come and go. Corporate structures endure." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air as Henderson gathered his materials and departed, leaving Henry with a clear understanding of the challenges ahead. This wasn't just about implementing a mechanical system, it was navigating a complex human ecosystem resistant to change. At 11:30, Henry's newly formed team assembled in his office. Harold represented maintenance, having delayed his retirement to participate. Rachel Brooks, a young engineer who'd shown interest in Henry's ideas, even before the council presentation, brought design expertise. Marco Vasquez surprised Henry with his presence. "Maintenance assistant," Marco explained with a small smile. "Mr. Harrington thought my attention to detail would be valuable to the team." 2 production workers completed the group: Peter Williams, Henry's longtime friend, and Sophia Diaz, a methodical line supervisor known for her diagnostic skills. "Thank you all for joining this project," Henry began, feeling awkward in his leadership role. "Each of you brings valuable perspective. Our goal is straightforward: implement the new production system on line 3 within 2 weeks. Document the results, then expand to remaining lines if successful." Rachel raised her hand. "I've reviewed your design. The vibration dampening approach is brilliant, but I'd like to suggest some minor refinements to the feedback mechanism." Henry nodded. "That's exactly why you're here. I don't claim to have all the answers. This is about combining our knowledge to create the best possible system." As the team discussed implementation logistics, Henry gradually relaxed into his role. These were his people, practical problem solvers who valued results over titles. By late afternoon, they had established a detailed plan. Line 3 would be taken offline Friday night, with installation occurring over the weekend to minimize production disruption. Henry would oversee the mechanical modifications personally, while Rachel and Julia, consulting after her teaching hours, would handle the control systems. As the team dispersed, Harold lingered behind. "Not bad for your first day as management," he observed. "How does it feel being on this side of the floor?" Henry glanced out the window at the factory below. "Strange. I still feel more comfortable down there than in this office." "That's why you're the right person for this job," Harold replied. "You haven't forgotten where you came from." The implementation weekend arrived with both excitement and tension. Henry arrived Saturday morning to find Lean 3 already disassembled, components organized precisely on tops, according to the plan developed with his team. Marco and Peter had worked the night shift to prepare everything, their attention to detail evident in the meticulous arrangement. Rachel and Julia huddled over laptop computers connected to the line's control systems, deep in technical conversation. Sophia methodically labeled each modification point with bright markers, while Harold supervised a small crew mounting the custom dampening hardware Henry had designed. What surprised Henry most was the number of volunteers. Word had spread throughout the factory, and workers from various departments had shown up on their day off to assist with the implementation. Even some who had previously mocked his ideas now wanted to be part of the project. "Quite the turnout," William Harrington commented, appearing unexpectedly beside Henry. "Sir, I didn't realize you'd be here today," Henry said, startled. "William, remember? And I wouldn't miss this." Harrington surveyed the busy scene with approval. "This is the most energy I've seen in this building in years." As the day progressed, Henry moved between teams, answering questions and making adjustments where needed. Julia's control system modifications integrated smoothly with Rachel's engineering refinements. Harold's experience proved invaluable for solving unexpected challenges with the older machinery. By evening, the physical installation was complete, with only programming and calibration remaining. Sunday afternoon brought the moment of truth, the first test run of the modified Line 3. Workers and executives alike gathered to witness the startup, including Douglas Henderson and Christopher Reed, their expressions revealing skepticism despite their supportive words. Henry stood at the control station, acutely aware of the stakes. This wasn't just about validating his design, it represented the future of his new department and potentially the factory itself. "Systems check complete," Julia announced, finalizing the control parameters. "Ready when you are, Dad." Henry took a deep breath and activated the startup sequence. The line hummed to life, each component engaging in the carefully orchestrated sequence his team had programmed. The characteristic vibrations that had plagued the original configuration were noticeably absent, replaced by a smoother, mechanical rhythm. As test materials entered the production sequence, all eyes focused on the monitoring displays. Stress indicators remained well below historical levels. Throughput metrics climbed steadily, surpassing the standard benchmarks and approaching the improved rates Henry had projected. Rachel watched the performance data with growing excitement. "The dampening system is exceeding expectations," she reported. "Vibrational stress is 52% below baseline, even better than our projection." After 30 minutes of flawless operation, spontaneous applause broke out among the workers. Dr. Foster, documenting the test from the sidelines, nodded with professional approval. Even Christopher Reed appeared impressed despite himself. Julia squeezed her father's arm. "You did it, Dad." "We did it," Henry corrected, looking around at his team. "Every person here contributed to this success." William Harrington stepped forward, addressing the assembled workers. "This is just the beginning. Based on these results, we'll be implementing Henry's system across all production lines in the coming months. Patriot Assembly isn't just staying in Haverford. We're entering a new era of growth. The announcement triggered another round of applause. Henry noticed Douglas Henderson slip away quietly, his expression unreadable. The CEO's departure reminded Henry that despite today's success, organizational challenges remained. Innovation might be proven, but acceptance wasn't guaranteed. As the crowd dispersed and his team began the post-test analysis, Henry took a moment to walk the length of the modified production line. He ran his hand along a machine he'd operated for 15 years, feeling the subtly different vibration pattern through his fingertips. The physical manifestation of his idea, born from experience, rejection, and perseverance, now hummed with vindicated purpose. "Penny for your thoughts?" Harold asked, joining him. "Thinking about next steps," Henry replied. "Line 4 has different configuration challenges. We'll need to adapt the system." Harold laughed. 1 hour after the biggest success of your career, and you're already focused on the next problem. Some things never change. The problems don't stop, so neither can we, Henry said, but he smiled as he said it. As evening approached and most workers headed home, Henry remained behind with Julia, completing documentation and preparing for Monday's full production test. They worked comfortably together, father and daughter, united by shared purpose and complementary skills. "Mom would be proud," Julia said softly, breaking a companionable silence. "Not just of what you built, but how you stood up for yourself." Henry paused, remembering Linda's unwavering belief in him, even when his confidence faltered. "She always saw possibilities I couldn't see." "Like this." Julia gestured to the transformed production line. "Especially this." Henry closed the technical manual he'd been updating. "Ready to call it a day? Your brother texted earlier. He's staying in town an extra night and wants to take us to dinner." As they walked toward the exit, Henry glanced back at line 3, now quiet but ready for tomorrow's full operation. In that moment, standing between his past as a line worker and his future as an innovator, he felt a profound sense of rightness, as if his entire career had been leading to this pivotal transformation. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows across the factory parking lot. Henry's truck, still bearing its rusted fender and primer patch, sat alone in its usual spot. Tomorrow he'd begin considering the company car that came with his new position. But tonight, this faithful vehicle represented the journey that had brought him here. Practical, unpretentious, and ultimately resilient. The success of Line 3 transformed the atmosphere at Patriot Assembly. Monday morning brought curious workers from every department, finding excuses to pass by and witness the modified production line in operation. The distinctive sound of the machinery, a smoother, more harmonious rhythm than the familiar clanking and grinding, became the talk of the factory. Efficiency metrics displayed on digital boards above the line showed sustained improvement, 26% increased throughput, stress indicators well below historical averages, and 0 maintenance alerts in the first 8 hours of operation. Henry arrived early, having slept little the night before. Not from worry, but from an overactive mind filled with ideas for the remaining production lines. He found Rachel already at her desk in the newly established Innovation Department workspace, analyzing data from the overnight shift. "Morning. Rachel, how did she perform after we left?" Rachel looked up from her computer, her expression animated. "Better than predicted. The overnight variables, temperature drops, humidity changes, didn't affect performance like they used to. The adaptive control system Julia helped design is compensating beautifully." Henry reviewed the overnight logs, nodding with satisfaction. Every indicator confirmed what they'd hoped. The system worked even better in continuous operation than during testing. "Have you seen this?" Rachel handed him a printout. Maintenance requests from Line 3 over the past 3 months compared to last night. The contrast was stark. Where the previous data showed dozens of maintenance calls per shift, the modified line had required none. "Harold's going to be bored," Henry joked, though both knew the maintenance supervisor would welcome the change. Years of scrambling to keep failing equipment operational had taken a toll on his team. "Mr. Wallace," Amanda appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Harrington has called a board meeting for 11 Shu. He'd like you to present the preliminary results." Henry had anticipated eventually briefing the board, but hadn't expected it so soon. "I'll need to put together some slides." "Already handled," Amanda assured him, handing him a folder. "I worked with Rachel yesterday to prepare these based on your implementation documentation. Just review and let me know if you need any changes." Henry flipped through the professionally designed presentation, impressed by Amanda's initiative and thoroughness. "This is excellent work, Amanda. Thank you." "Just doing my job," she replied with a small smile, "though I must admit, it's refreshing to support a project with actual merit." The board meeting convened in the executive conference room. 12 men and women in business attire seated around a polished table. Henry recognized most from company events, but had never directly interacted with them. William Harrington motioned for Henry to take a seat near the head of the table. "For those who haven't met him personally, this is Henry Wallace, our new Director of Production Innovation," Harrington began. "As you know, his redesigned system has been implemented on Line 3, and the initial results are extremely promising." Douglas. Henderson sat opposite Henry, his expression professionally neutral, though his rigid posture betrayed tension. Christopher Reed had not been invited to the meeting. Henry presented the preliminary data with straightforward clarity, avoiding technical jargon in favor of bottom-line impacts. The board members listened attentively, several taking notes. When he finished, the questions began. "These efficiency improvements are impressive," said Catherine Blackwell, a stern-looking woman Henry knew to be a significant company shareholder. "What's the implementation timeline for the remaining lines?" "We've developed a phased approach," Henry explained. "Line 4 next week, followed by lines 1 and 2. The auxiliary lines will require more substantial modifications due to their older components, but we project full factory implementation within 6 weeks. "And the cost?" asked Robert Myers, the Chief Financial Officer. "Initial estimates indicate we'll recover the full implementation investment within 4 months through reduced maintenance costs and increased output." Myers looked surprised. 4 months? That's extraordinary ROI for a capital improvement project. The questioning continued for 20 minutes, covering technical details, staffing implications, and potential supply chain adjustments needed to accommodate increased production capacity. Henry answered each query directly, drawing on his decades of practical knowledge without apology or qualification. When the board appeared satisfied, Harrington addressed the room. "Based on these results, I'm recommending immediate approval for full factory implementation. Additionally, I propose allocating resources to document the system thoroughly for potential deployment across our other manufacturing facilities." Henderson cleared his throat. "While the initial results are encouraging, I feel compelled to advise caution. 6 weeks is an aggressive timeline, and any disruption to our existing production commitments could jeopardize quarterly targets." A valid concern," Harrington acknowledged. "Henry, how would you address this?" Henry had anticipated the objection. "We've structured the implementation schedule specifically to minimize disruption. Each line will be modified during scheduled maintenance windows, with installation teams working around the clock to ensure rapid turnaround. Based on Line 3's experience, we expect each subsequent implementation to be more efficient than the last." The board voted unanimously to approve the full implementation plan, with Henderson abstaining rather than opposing directly, a political choice that preserved his position while distancing himself from potential failure. As the meeting adjourned, Several board members approached Henry with congratulations and additional questions. Catherine Blackwell lingered until they were relatively private. "Mr. Wallace, I knew your father-in-law, Edward Davis," she said, surprising Henry. "He operated a drill press at Patriot Assembly when I first joined the board 30 years ago. Always said management would run smoother if they spent a month working the line first." Henry hadn't expected this personal connection. "Linda, my late wife, often said the same thing. Edward was right," Blackwell continued, "and your success proves it. Don't let Henderson undermine what you've built here. Some in management view shop floor innovations as threats rather than opportunities." "I've noticed," Henry replied dryly. "Henderson has powerful friends," she warned, her voice lowered further. "Board support is strong now, but corporate memories can be short. Document everything, build allies throughout the organization, and deliver results consistently." Henry thanked her for the advice, recognizing the value of having a board ally, particularly one who understood the divide between management and workers. Returning to the production floor, Henry found his team gathered around Line 3, where Harold was demonstrating the monitoring system to a group of maintenance workers from other departments. 36 years crawling under these machines, fixing the same broken parts over and over, Harold was saying. "This system addresses the root causes instead of just treating symptoms. It's the difference between taking painkillers and actually curing the disease." Henry smiled at the apt analogy. Harold had a talent for making technical concepts accessible, a skill Henry himself was developing in his new role. The afternoon brought a surprise visit from Mayor Burns and 2 members of the Haverford Town Council. William Harrington personally escorted them through the factory, eventually bringing them to Line 3, where Henry provided a simplified explanation of the modifications. "The efficiency improvements translate directly to job security and potential growth," Harrington explained to the visitors. "We're already considering increasing our workforce to handle expanded production capacity." Mayor Burns appeared genuinely impressed. "This is exactly the kind of innovation our manufacturing sector needs. Too often we hear that American factories can't compete with overseas operations, but clearly that's not the case when we leverage the knowledge of our experienced workforce." That evening, Julia hosted a small celebration dinner at her home for the core implementation team. As plates were cleared and conversation flowed comfortably, Henry found himself on the back deck with Harold, enjoying the cool evening air. "Henderson's been unusually quiet since the board meeting," Harold observed. "Not a good sign," Henry nodded. "Catherine Blackwell warned me he has influential connections, suggested I should watch my back." "Smart woman," Harold agreed. "Henderson didn't get to be CEO by accepting defeat gracefully. He'll be looking for ways to regain control of the narrative." "Let him try," Henry replied with newfound confidence. "As long as the system performs, the results speak for themselves." Harold raised his glass. "To results, then, and to whatever comes next." The following weeks unfolded in a blur of activity. Line 4's implementation proceeded even more smoothly than Line 3, with the team applying lessons learned from the first installation. Rachel's engineering refinements improved the dampening system further, while Julia's control algorithm adjustments enhanced responsiveness to material variations. Throughout this period, Henry observed subtle shifts in factory dynamics. Workers, who had initially viewed him with skepticism, now sought his input on operational challenges. Young engineers began approaching him with their own improvement ideas, no longer discouraged by the cultural divide that had previously stifled innovation. Even Christopher Reed's attitude evolved from outright hostility to grudging professional respect, particularly after Henry incorporated several of Reed's technical suggestions into the Line 1 implementation plan. The head engineer would never be a close ally, but the antagonism had diminished to manageable levels. Douglas Henderson, however, remained a carefully calculated presence. Publicly supportive while privately distant, the CEO maintained minimal, direct interaction with Henry's department. His focus appeared to shift toward external matters, client relationships, investor communications, and media appearances, where he subtly positioned himself as the visionary behind Patriot Assembly's modernization initiative. 4 weeks into the implementation, with 3 of the 4 main production lines successfully modified, Henry received an unexpected visit from Amanda Russell late Friday afternoon. "Mr. Wallace, I thought you should know. Mr. Henderson has called a private meeting with several board members tomorrow morning at his home. It's not on his official calendar." Henry looked up from the Line 2 performance reports he'd been reviewing. "How did you find out?" "I handle his travel arrangements," Amanda explained. "He asked me to book a dinner reservation for tonight at the Haverford Inn for himself and 3 board members, followed by breakfast at his residence tomorrow. The names weren't included on any official schedule." "Do you know which board members?" "Robert Myers, James Whitfield, and Thomas Buchanan." Henry recognized Myers as the CFO, who'd seemed impressed with the financial projections. The other 2 were unknown quantities to him. "Thank you for letting me know, Amanda." After she departed, Henry considered the implications. A private meeting with select board members outside official channels suggested Henderson was building coalition support for something he didn't want broadly known. Henry's desk phone rang, William Harrington's direct line. "Henry, do you have plans tomorrow morning?" Harrington asked without preamble. "Nothing that can't be rescheduled," Henry replied, wondering if Harrington also knew about Henderson's meeting. "Good. I'd like you to join me for breakfast at my home, 8 a.m. There's someone I want you to meet." Henry arrived at the Harrington estate precisely at 8 the following morning. To his surprise, Catherine Blackwell's car was already in the driveway. Inside, he found Blackwell and Harrington in deep conversation over coffee in the sunroom. "Henry, thank you for coming on short notice," Harrington greeted him. "You know Catherine, of course." "Good morning, Mr. Wallace." Blackwell nodded. "We were just discussing Douglas's breakfast gathering, so they knew about Henderson's meeting." Henry took the offered seat, accepting coffee from Harrington. "Henderson has convinced Myers that your innovation, while valuable, should be licensed to other manufacturers rather than implemented across our facilities," Harrington explained. "He's arguing that the short-term profit from licensing fees outweighs the long-term operational benefits of keeping the technology proprietary. That approach maximizes his bonus structure," Blackwell added. "Licensing revenues count toward his performance metrics immediately, while efficiency improvements accrue more gradually." Henry absorbed this information. "Is licensing a bad strategy for the company?" "Not necessarily in all circumstances," Harrington acknowledged, "but in this case, we believe it would forfeit a significant competitive advantage. Your system doesn't just reduce costs, it creates capacity for product expansion that none of our competitors can match currently." Henderson also wants to bring in a team of professional engineers to document and refine your system before implementation at our other facilities, Blackwell continued, "effectively sidelining you from the broader rollout." Henry wasn't surprised. Henderson had been maneuvering to regain control since the board approved the full implementation. "What's your preferred approach?" he asked Harrington directly. "I believe we should complete the Haverford implementation, document the results thoroughly, then begin a controlled rollout to our Pittsburgh facility under your direct supervision. Using the same shop floor collaborative model you've established here." "And I agree," Blackwell added, "but we need to be strategic about presenting this to the full board. Henderson has built support by framing the licensing option as maximizing shareholder value." Harrington leaned forward. "Henry, the board's quarterly meeting is next Friday. I'd like you to prepare a comprehensive presentation on the long term, strategic benefits of keeping your system in-house and expanding through our existing facilities. What about Henderson's meeting this morning? Let him make his case to his allies." Blackwell said confidently. Myers is financially minded, but ultimately reasonable. Once he sees the complete picture, including the market positioning advantages, he'll reassess Henderson's proposal. Henry agreed to develop the presentation, though he couldn't help feeling thrown into corporate politics beyond his experience. As if reading his mind, Harrington offered reassurance. This isn't about politics, Henry. It's about the future of manufacturing in communities like Haverford. Your innovation doesn't just improve efficiency, it creates a viable path for American factories to thrive in a global economy that's been stacked against them. The personal significance of Harrington's statement wasn't lost on Henry. This wasn't just about his system anymore. It represented a potential lifeline for manufacturing towns nationwide. Returning home, Henry called Julia to discuss the situation. To his surprise, she already knew about Henderson's licensing proposal. Michael heard about it from his financial contacts, she explained. Henderson's been positioning it as a revenue-generating opportunity to investors for several days. Harrington wants me to make a case for keeping the technology in-house at the board meeting Friday, Henry said. I'm not sure I have the corporate presentation skills to counter Henderson effectively. Then don't try to beat him at his game, Julia advised. Present the case your way, straightforward, practical, focused on the hard facts and long-term benefits. That's what convinced the Industrial Council, and it's what will convince the board. Henry spent Sunday organizing his thoughts, focusing on what he knew best, the technical fundamentals that made his system valuable. By evening, he had a clear outline for his presentation, though he still felt unprepared for the boardroom dynamics he would face. Monday morning, Henry arrived at his office to find Rachel waiting with unexpected news. We've received a report from Quality Control, she said, handing him a document. Line 3 is showing statistical improvements in product consistency that we hadn't anticipated. The dampening system isn't just preventing breakdowns, it's creating more precise manufacturing tolerances. Henry reviewed the data, immediately grasping the significance. These tolerance improvements would allow us to produce higher precision components than our competitors. Exactly. We could expand into specialty markets currently dominated by overseas manufacturers who use more expensive equipment. This revelation added a crucial dimension to Henry's board presentation. The system offered more than cost savings and efficiency. It opened entirely new market opportunities. Throughout the week, Henry refined his case while monitoring the final implementation on Line 2. The entire factory now hummed with the distinctive sound of the modified production system, a physical testament to the transformation he had initiated. On Thursday afternoon, Henry received an unexpected visitor. Douglas Henderson appeared in his office doorway, his expression inscrutable. "Do you have a moment, Wallace?" Henry gestured to a chair, curious about this rare direct approach from the CEO. Henderson closed the door before sitting. "I understand you're presenting an alternative proposal to the board tomorrow." "I've been asked to outline the benefits of implementing the system across our facilities." "Yes," Henry confirmed, seeing no benefit in pretense. "Licensing would make you wealthy," Henderson said, his tone matter-of-fact. "As the patent holder, you'd receive substantial royalties from every manufacturer who adopts the technology, perhaps millions over time." Henry hadn't considered the personal financial implications in those terms. "That's not my primary concern." "No!" Henderson raised an eyebrow. "What is your primary concern then?" "Ensuring that Patriot Assembly and the people who work here benefit fully from the innovation." Henderson studied him with genuine curiosity. "You know, Wallace, I've never quite understood your motivation. Most people in your position would leverage this opportunity for maximum personal gain. Most people haven't spent 32 years watching what happens when companies prioritize short-term profits over long-term viability," Henry replied evenly. I've seen too many factories close because they sold their competitive advantages for quick returns. Henderson nodded slowly, as if seeing Henry clearly for the first time. We disagree on strategy, not objectives. Remember that tomorrow. As Henderson departed, Henry considered the unexpected exchange. The CEO hadn't threatened or attempted to persuade him, merely offered perspective. Perhaps there was more complexity to Douglas Henderson than he'd previously recognized. Friday morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect autumn day that belied the tension brewing inside Patriot Assembly. Henry arrived early, taking a final walk through the production floor before the board meeting. All 4 main lines now operated with his modified system, the factory floor humming with synchronized efficiency that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Workers nodded respectfully as he passed, some offering encouragement for the upcoming meeting. Word had spread about Henderson's licensing proposal, creating unease among employees concerned about what it might mean for their future. Henry reassured them with calm confidence, though his own stomach knotted with anticipation. In his office, Henry reviewed his presentation one last time. Julia had helped refine it the previous evening, stripping away unnecessary technical details while preserving the core arguments. The resulting slides were clear, direct, and compelling, much like Henry himself. "Are you ready?" Rachel asked him from the doorway. She and the rest of the innovation team had spent the week collecting additional data to support his case. "As ready as I'll ever be," Henry replied, gathering his materials. "How's line 2 performing this morning?" "Running at 127% of previous capacity with 0 maintenance alerts," Rachel reported with satisfaction. "Quality control is documenting tolerance improvements consistent with what we saw on line 3. Henry nodded. Perfect timing. The boardroom was already full when Henry arrived. 14 board members sat around the polished table with William Harrington at its head. Douglas Henderson occupied his usual position near Harrington, immaculately dressed and exuding practiced confidence. Several executives Henry recognized from various departments lined the walls, including Christopher Reed, who studied Henry with unreadable expression. "Before we begin," Harrington announced as Henry took his seat, "I'd like to welcome our special guest. James Harrington has flown in from our Chicago headquarters to observe today's proceedings." An older man nodded from the corner of the room. William's father and former CEO, whose sharp eyes missed nothing despite his advanced age. Henry hadn't expected the company patriarch's presence, which undoubtedly added weight to the proceedings. "Our agenda today includes 2 proposals regarding the Wallace production system," Harrington continued, using the formal name the board had assigned to Henry's innovation. "Mr. Henderson will present the licensing strategy, followed by Mr. Wallace outlining the internal implementation approach. The board will then deliberate and determine our path forward." Henderson rose first, his presentation polished and professional. Charts illustrated projected licensing revenues, market penetration estimates, and intellectual property protection strategies. His voice carried the practiced cadence of a seasoned executive as he outlined the financial benefits of licensing the technology to other manufacturers. By conservatively estimating adoption by 12 major manufacturers in the first year, we project licensing revenues exceeding $20 million, Henderson explained, highlighting a graph showing 5-year revenue projections. This approach rapidly monetizes the innovation while maintaining our competitive advantage through preferential implementation at our facilities. Henry noted how Henderson subtly positioned himself as caretaker of both the company's interests and Henry's own financial benefit, repeatedly emphasizing the personal royalties Henry would receive under the licensing model. It was cleverly done, making any opposition from Henry appear potentially self-defeating. When Henderson concluded, Robert Myers, the CFO who had attended Henderson's private meeting, asked several detailed questions about revenue projections and implementation timelines. Henderson's answers were smooth and well-prepared, emphasizing short-term financial gains that would appeal to shareholders. Then it was Henry's turn. As he approached the front of the room, he noticed James Harrington lean forward slightly, his attention sharpening. Henry took a steadying breath and began. "Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. Mr. Henderson has presented compelling financial projections for licensing the production system. I'd like to offer an alternative perspective based on long-term strategic considerations." Henry's opening slides compared the short-term revenue from licensing against the projected 5-year competitive advantage of keeping the technology proprietary. Unlike Henderson's slick graphics, Henry's presentation used straightforward factory data, visualized in clear, practical formats. Licensing provides immediate revenue, but surrenders our substantial efficiency advantage within 12 to 18 months, Henry explained. In contrast, implementing the system across all Harrington Group facilities would establish a long-term cost structure competitors cannot match until they develop similar technology independently. He moved to the next section, revealing the unexpected quality improvement data from lines 3 and 4. Beyond efficiency gains, we've documented manufacturing precision improvements that enable production of higher tolerance components. This opens new market segments currently dominated by overseas manufacturers using more expensive equipment. This revelation caught the board's attention. Catherine Blackwell leaned forward, exchanging a significant glance with William Harrington. "To put this in concrete terms," Henry continued, his confidence growing, "our preliminary analysis indicates Patriot Assembly could compete for aerospace and medical device component contracts previously beyond our manufacturing capabilities. These high-margin markets represent approximately $140 million in potential annual revenue for the Harrington Group, with significantly higher profit margins than our current product mix." Robert Myers' expression shifted noticeably, the financial implications clearly resonating with the CFO's priorities. Henry's final slides outlined a phased implementation strategy across all 17 Harrington Group facilities over 18 months, using the same shop floor collaborative model that had proven successful at Patriot Assembly. This approach leverages our greatest asset, the practical knowledge of experienced workers at each facility, Henry emphasized. Rather than imposing a top-down implementation, we would replicate the cross-functional teams that made Haverford's implementation so effective. As Henry concluded his presentation, James Harrington spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of authority despite its aged timbre. "Mr. Wallace, your background is in production, not corporate strategy. Why should the board favor your strategic assessment over executives with business training?" The question hung in the air, direct and challenging. Henry met the elder Harrington's gaze without hesitation. "Sir, my 32 years on the factory floor taught me that short-term financial gains often come at the expense of long-term viability. I've watched companies license innovations, enjoy brief revenue spikes, then struggle when competitors achieve parity. The workers left behind when those companies eventually downsize or close don't appear on quarterly financial statements, but they represent the true cost of prioritizing immediate returns over sustainable advantage." James Harrington's expression remained neutral, but he nodded almost imperceptibly. "A perspective worth considering." The questioning continued for nearly an hour, board members exploring both proposals in detail. Henderson defended his approach with practiced skill, while Henry relied on straightforward answers grounded in practical realities and data. Finally, William Harrington called for board deliberation. Henry and Henderson were asked to wait outside while the directors discussed the options and voted on their preferred strategy. In the hallway outside the boardroom, Henderson surprised Henry by offering his hand. "A compelling presentation, Wallace. Regardless of the outcome, you've earned my respect." Henry accepted the handshake, recognizing the genuine acknowledgement beneath Henderson's polished exterior. "Your licensing strategy has merit. I just believe there's more value in the alternative approach. Different priorities," Henderson conceded. "You see the factory, I see the balance sheet. Both perspectives have validity." They waited in unexpected, amicable silence, the previous antagonism diminished by mutual professional respect. After 40 minutes, Amanda appeared to escort them back into the boardroom. William Harrington addressed them directly. "After thorough deliberation, the board has reached a decision. While both proposals offer significant benefits, we voted to proceed with Mr. Wallace's internal implementation strategy across all Harrington Group facilities." Henderson maintained his professional composure, nodding acceptance despite the clear defeat. Henry felt a surge of relief, quickly tempered by the weight of responsibility this decision placed upon him. "However," Harrington continued, "the board has added 2 provisions. First, we'll establish metrics to re-evaluate the licensing option in 18 months based on market conditions and competitor development. Second, we'll create a hybrid leadership structure for the implementation phase." He turned to Henderson. "Douglas, your expertise in corporate finance and organizational management will be essential for scaling this initiative across multiple facilities. The board requests that you work directly with Henry to develop a comprehensive implementation framework that maximizes both operational and financial outcomes." Henderson straightened slightly, recognizing the diplomatic compromise. "Of course, Mr. Chairman, I'm committed to the company's success, whatever strategy we pursue." And Henry, Harrington addressed him. "Your technical insight and shop floor approach will drive the implementation, with Douglas ensuring alignment with corporate objectives. Can you work effectively together on this basis?" Henry considered the arrangement. Working with Henderson would be challenging, but the alternative, attempting to implement across 17 facilities without executive-level support, would be far more difficult. "Yes, sir. I believe we can find productive common ground." After the meeting adjourned, Catherine Blackwell approached Henry in the hallway. "That went well," she observed with dry understatement. "The compromise was unexpected," Henry admitted. "Compromise is how things actually get done in corporate environments," Blackwell replied. "James suggested it, actually. He was quite impressed with your presentation, particularly your answer about long-term thinking." "James Harrington suggested partnering me with Henderson." Blackwell nodded. "He said something interesting afterward, that the best innovations come from combining floor-level expertise with executive perspective, but companies rarely create structures that facilitate that combination." Before Henry could respond, James Harrington himself approached, moving with the deliberate pace of advanced age. "Mr. Wallace," the company patriarch greeted him. "Walk with me if you have a moment." Henry accompanied the elder Harrington down the executive corridor, matching his measured pace. "Your innovation reminds me of something my father used to say," James began. "He built this company on the principle that the people closest to the work often have the clearest view of how to improve it. Somewhere along the way, we began valuing MBAs over practical experience, an overcorrection, in my view." He paused. Near a historic photograph showing the original Patriot Assembly facility in the 1950s. "My father would have appreciated your approach, building something rather than just theorizing about it." "Thank you, sir," Henry replied, genuinely moved by the comparison. "Don't misunderstand me," James continued with a wry smile. "Henderson's financial acumen is valuable, This company needs both perspectives to thrive. Your challenge now is finding productive alignment despite your different priorities. Any advice on how to manage that? Remember that beneath the corporate titles and different vocabularies, you both want this company to succeed. Start there and build common ground. By Monday morning, news of the board's decision had spread throughout Patriot Assembly. Henry arrived to find his team in high spirits, already discussing implementation possibilities for the Pittsburgh facility. Rachel had compiled detailed documentation of the Haverford modifications, while Harold was organizing training materials for maintenance teams at other locations. To Henry's surprise, Douglas Henderson requested a meeting in his office that afternoon. When Henry arrived, he found Henderson reviewing financial projections with Amanda. "Henry, thank you for coming," Henderson said, gesturing toward a chair. "I've been analyzing the resource requirements for multi-facility implementation. We should discuss priorities and timeline expectations." For the next hour, they worked through preliminary plans, identifying potential challenges and resource needs. Henderson's approach was surprisingly collaborative, free from the political maneuvering that had characterized their previous interactions. "I've scheduled a visit to the Pittsburgh facility next week," Henderson said as they concluded. "Would you be available to join me?" The plant manager is skeptical about modifications to their production system. Your practical perspective might be more persuasive than my financial arguments. "Of course," Henry agreed, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "I'd like to bring Rachel from my team as well. Her engineering background helps bridge the technical communication gap." Henderson nodded. "Good thinking. I'll have Amanda make the arrangements." After leaving Henderson's office, Henry headed down to the production floor where Julia was consulting with the Line 4 team on control system refinements. She looked up as he approached, immediately reading his expression. "Good meeting with Henderson?" she asked, surprised. "Surprisingly productive," Henry confirmed. "We're visiting Pittsburgh next week to begin planning their implementation." "So he's fully on board now?" "Let's say he's professionally committed to making it work," Henry qualified. The board's decision left him little choice, but he seems to be approaching it constructively. Julia smiled. "Mom always said people can surprise you if you give them the chance." Later that afternoon, Henry met with his expanded implementation team. In addition to the original group, several new members had joined: engineers selected by Rachel, production specialists from various departments, and a financial analyst assigned by Henderson to track implementation costs and benefits. "Pittsburgh will be our pilot for expanding beyond Haverford," Henry explained, outlining the approach they'd developed. "Their production system is similar to ours but newer, which presents both advantages and challenges." The team engaged enthusiastically, offering insights and raising practical considerations Henry hadn't anticipated. The collaborative energy reminded him of the early days working on his prototype, the same spirit of practical problem-solving applied to a much larger scale. As the meeting concluded, Harold lingered behind. "Quite a change from hiding in that storage room after hours," he observed with satisfaction. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed," Henry admitted. 6 months ago, I was just trying to save my job. And now you're transforming an entire company," Harold replied. "Speaking of transformation, have you seen what's happening in town?" "What do you mean?" "The news about Patriot Assembly's expansion has already impacted Haverford. 2 suppliers have committed to opening local facilities to support our increased production. The community college is expanding its technical program to meet anticipated workforce needs. Even real estate prices are stabilizing after years of decline." Henry hadn't considered these broader implications. His focus had remained on the factory itself rather than its economic ripple effects throughout the community. Julia mentioned the college received a grant to develop curriculum around advanced manufacturing techniques. Harold continued. They've asked her to lead the program development. Your daughter's becoming quite the local education celebrity. Henry smiled with pride. She's always been the natural teacher in the family. That evening, driving home, Henry took a detour through downtown Haverford. He noticed subtle but meaningful changes. A coming soon sign on a previously vacant storefront, fresh paint on the community center, increased activity at local restaurants. While his immediate focus remained on the upcoming Pittsburgh implementation, Henry found himself contemplating the unexpected community impact of his innovation. What had begun as a personal quest to save jobs at Patriot Assembly had evolved into something far more significant. A potential revitalization of manufacturing, not just at one factory, but potentially throughout the Harrington Group's facilities. As he pulled into his driveway, Henry noticed a package on his front porch. Inside, he found a framed black and white photograph of the original Patriot Assembly facility from 1952, accompanied by a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Innovation thrives when experience and vision align. Looking forward to seeing what you build next. James Harrington. Henry hung the photograph in his home office, a reminder that his journey, remarkable as it had been, was still just beginning. The real work of implementation across 17 facilities lay ahead, with all its challenges and possibilities. For a man who had spent decades being overlooked, the path forward was both daunting and exhilarating. But as he studied the historic image of the factory where he'd spent his entire career, Henry felt a deep certainty that he was exactly where he belonged, building something that mattered, one practical solution at a time. 6 months after the board meeting, Henry stood on the observation platform overlooking the Pittsburgh facility's production floor. The familiar hum of his redesigned system filled the massive space, though this installation, the fourth facility to implement his innovation, had presented unique challenges. Older equipment, entrenched processes, and initial workforce skepticism had tested the implementation team's adaptability. Yet the results spoke for themselves. Production efficiency had increased by 31% in just 3 weeks of operation. Impressive transformation, remarked Frank Miller, the Pittsburgh plant manager who had initially resisted the changes. I've managed manufacturing operations for 22 years, and I've never seen improvement numbers like these. Henry nodded, watching the synchronized movement of machinery below. Your maintenance team deserves much of the credit. Their knowledge of the equipment quirks was invaluable during installation. That was your insight, though, Frank acknowledged, involving the floor workers in the implementation rather than imposing changes from above, not the traditional approach. Traditional approaches weren't solving the problems, Henry replied simply. They descended to the main floor, where Rachel was conducting a training session with the Pittsburgh engineering team. In the months since the board decision, Rachel had grown into her role as technical implementation leader, translating Henry's practical insights into engineering specifications that facility teams could adapt to their specific equipment. Cleveland. Facility assessment is complete, she reported as Henry approached. Their configuration is similar to Haverford's, which should simplify the next implementation. The team there is already preparing based on the documentation we sent. Henry checked his watch. Henderson's video conference is in 20 minutes. Let's wrap up here and head back to the office. The partnership with Douglas Henderson had evolved into an unexpectedly effective working relationship. Henderson's organizational expertise and corporate connections had proven invaluable for scaling the implementation across multiple facilities, while Henry's practical approach ensured the technology was properly adapted to each factory's unique needs. Their weekly coordination meetings had become a model of productive collaboration despite their contrasting styles. In the Pittsburgh facility's conference room, Henderson appeared on the large screen, impeccably dressed as always despite being 3 cities away at corporate headquarters. "Henry, Rachel, Frank, good afternoon," Henderson greeted them. "I've just come from the quarterly earnings call. The board highlighted the Pittsburgh implementation as a key factor in our improved manufacturing margins." "Were the numbers in line with projections?" Henry asked. "They exceeded projections by approximately 12%, Henderson replied, the slightest smile indicating his satisfaction. "The quality improvement aspect continues to deliver unexpected benefits. We've secured 2 aerospace component contracts, and based on the enhanced precision capabilities at Haverford and Cincinnati," Frank leaned forward. "When can Pittsburgh begin bidding on those precision contracts?" "Complete 4 weeks of consistent production at current specifications, and we'll certify your facility for those bid opportunities," Henderson answered. "The certification team is already scheduled." After discussing implementation timelines for the remaining facilities, Henderson addressed Henry directly. "The National Manufacturing Association has requested you as keynote speaker for their annual conference. They're particularly interested in your perspective on shop floor innovation and its impact on American manufacturing competitiveness." Henry hesitated. Public speaking remained outside his comfort zone, despite the numerous presentations he'd given over the past months. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for a keynote address." "On the contrary," Henderson countered, "you're precisely the right person. Your story resonates because it challenges conventional wisdom about where innovation originates. The board strongly encourages your participation." After the call ended, Rachel gave Henry an encouraging nudge. "A national keynote address. Not bad for a guy who was hiding in a storage room building a prototype last year," Henry smiled ruefully. "Sometimes I still feel more comfortable in that storage room than in a spotlight." "Well, get used to it," Frank advised. "Word travels. In manufacturing circles, what you've accomplished here is becoming something of a legend in the industry." The following week, Henry returned to Haverford, where the transformed Patriot assembly facility continued to exceed performance expectations. Under Harold's supervision, the original implementation had been further refined, incorporating lessons from each subsequent facility adaptation. Henry walked the production floor, greeting workers by name and noting small improvements they'd made to his system, additional dampening here, modified feedback mechanisms there. This organic evolution represented exactly what he'd hoped for, a living system that continued to improve through the practical insights of those who operated it daily. In the cafeteria, he found Harold having lunch with several maintenance workers, including Marco Vasquez, whose discreet assistance had made the original prototype possible. "The prodigal innovator returns," Harold announced as Henry joined them. "How was Pittsburgh?" "Challenging but successful," Henry replied, setting down his tray. Their equipment dating from 3 different decades complicated the installation. But Rachel's team adapted beautifully. "She's become quite the implementation specialist," Harold observed. "Patriot Assembly won't keep her much longer. I hear corporate headquarters is creating a permanent innovation division with her name, on a director position." Henry nodded. Henderson mentioned the possibility. "She deserves the opportunity." Marco spoke up. "My nephew just got hired for the new 3rd shift. Says the orientation includes the story of how your system saved the factory. They're calling it the Wallace approach now." "That's uncomfortable," Henry admitted, though secretly pleased that his methods were becoming institutionalized. After lunch, Henry headed to the community college where Julia was conducting a workshop for local manufacturing employees. The expanded technical program she had developed had become a vital pipeline for skilled workers as Patriot Assembly and its suppliers increased their operations in Haverford. He slipped into the back of the classroom where 20 students, ranging from recent high school graduates to middle-aged factory workers seeking advancement, watched Julia demonstrate control system principles on specialized training equipment donated by the Harrington Group. The key insight behind the Wallace system isn't just its mechanical design, Julia was explaining. It's the recognition that efficiency improvements must account for real-world operating conditions, not just theoretical ideals. Henry smiled at hearing his practical philosophy articulated so clearly. Julia had always understood the value of bridging theoretical knowledge and hands-on experience, a perspective she now imparted to a new generation of manufacturing professionals. After class, Julia spotted him and waved him forward to meet her. Students, many of whom regarded Henry with something approaching awe. "My dad doesn't usually sit in on my classes," Julia told them with a smile. "You should take advantage of having the systems inventor here to answer questions." For the next 30 minutes, Henry fielded thoughtful inquiries about implementation, challenges, maintenance considerations, and adaptation principles. The students' engagement reflected a renewed interest in manufacturing careers, a significant shift from the prevailing sentiment when Patriot Assembly had teetered on the brink of downsizing just a year earlier. "Your students ask better questions than most engineers I've met," Henry told Julia as they walked to her office afterward. "They're motivated differently," she explained. "They see advanced manufacturing as a viable future, not a declining industry. Your innovation changed that perception locally, and it's spreading as other facilities implement the system." Julia's office walls displayed framed news articles chronicling the Patriot Assembly transformation, alongside technical diagrams of the Wallace system and photographs of successful implementations. A letter from the state's Department of Economic Development confirmed grant funding for expanded technical education programs. "Mayor Burns called this morning," Julia mentioned as they reviewed her curriculum plans. "The town council unanimously approved tax incentives for the new supplier park development. Construction begins next month." The supplier park, a dedicated industrial zone for businesses supporting Patriot Assembly's expanded operations, represented Haverford's largest economic development project in decades. What had begun as Henry's attempt to save existing jobs had catalyzed growth beyond anyone's expectations. "Did I show you this?" Julia asked, pulling a newspaper from her desk drawer. The business section featured an article headlined, "American Manufacturing Renaissance. The Wallace Approach Challenges Conventional Wisdom." The accompanying photograph showed Henry on the Patriot Assembly production floor, surrounded by his implementation team. "Henderson sent me that yesterday," Henry said. "Suggested I should prepare for interview requests from more business publications." "Speaking of Henderson," Julia replied, "Michael mentioned he's being considered for a promotion to executive vice president at corporate headquarters. Apparently, his leadership on the implementation initiative has impressed the board." Henry wasn't surprised. Despite their rocky beginning, Henderson had demonstrated remarkable adaptability and genuine commitment to the system's success across all facilities. That evening, Henry arrived home to find Catherine Blackwell waiting in his driveway. The board member's unexpected presence momentarily concerned him, but her relaxed demeanor suggested this wasn't a crisis visit. "Miss Blackwell," he greeted her, "this is a surprise." "Catherine, please," she corrected, extending a hand. "I was in Haverford for the supplier park planning session and thought I'd deliver this personally rather than sending it through official channels." She handed him an envelope bearing the Harrington Group logo. Inside, Henry found a formal invitation to a special board meeting in Chicago the following month, along with a handwritten note from William Harrington. "We'll be discussing the future of the Wallace system and its architect. Your presence is essential." "Any hints about what this means?" Henry asked, studying the cryptic message. Catherine's expression remained carefully neutral. "The implementation success has exceeded even optimistic projections. The board is considering next steps, including potential expansion of the innovation approach beyond manufacturing processes." "Expansion how?" "That's for the meeting," she replied with the slightest smile. "But I will say the impact of your work has provoked significant strategic discussions about how the company identifies and develops innovation going forward." After Catherine departed, Henry sat on his porch, contemplating the invitation. The past months had carried him far beyond his original purpose of saving factory jobs. Each implementation had built momentum, validating his approach while opening new possibilities neither he nor the company had initially envisioned. The following Monday, Henry arrived at Patriot Assembly to find Amanda Russell waiting in his office, her typically composed demeanor showing unusual excitement. "Mr. Wallace, I've been asked to coordinate your schedule for the Chicago board meeting next month. There are several preparation sessions Mr. Harrington would like you to participate in before the presentation." "Presentation?" Henry questioned. "The invitation didn't mention me presenting anything." Amanda hesitated. "I may have spoken out of turn. Mr. Harrington planned to discuss this with you directly this afternoon." Henry's curiosity grew. "Since you've already started, you might as well finish. What presentation?" "The board has requested a comprehensive overview of potential applications for your methodological approach beyond the current system. They're calling it the Wallace Innovation Framework, identifying practical opportunities for improvement by leveraging worker experience across all company operations, not just manufacturing." The scope of this request stunned Henry. His practical approach to solving production problems was being considered as a company-wide innovation methodology. William Harrington confirmed this direction when they spoke that afternoon, explaining that the board had recognized broader implications in Henry's success. "Your system works because it blends floor-level expertise with engineering principles and business objectives," Harrington explained. "The board believes this approach could transform how we develop innovations across all operations, from supply chain management to product development." "I'm not qualified to design an innovation framework for the entire company," Henry protested. "That's precisely why it must be you," Harrington countered. "The moment we assign this to consultants or academics, it becomes another theoretical model divorced from practical reality. Your credibility comes from actually solving problems rather than just theorizing about them." As the Chicago meeting approached, Henry worked closely with Henderson to develop the framework presentation. Their collaboration had evolved into genuine partnership, each recognizing the other's complementary strengths. "The key is balancing structured methodology with practical flexibility," Henderson observed during one planning session. "Too rigid, and we kill the innovation potential. Too loose, and it becomes impossible to scale. Like the implementation partnership we developed," Henry noted. "Clear objectives and accountability, but room for adaptation based on local conditions." Henderson nodded approvingly. "Exactly. We're not just presenting a theoretical framework, we're sharing an approach we've already proven works." The night before departing for Chicago, Henry visited his original prototype, now displayed in Patriot Assembly's lobby as a symbol of the company's renewed commitment to innovation. The carefully preserved assembly of repurposed parts and custom adaptations reminded him of late nights in the storage room, working by maintenance lighting with borrowed tools. Julia found him there, contemplation evident in his expression. "Thinking about how far you've come?" she asked, standing beside him. "Thinking about your mother," Henry replied quietly. "She always believed in me even when I doubted myself. Said I had a gift for seeing how things could work better." Julia took his hand. "She was right. I wish she could see all this." Henry gestured toward the factory beyond the lobby windows, where the evening shift operated with smooth efficiency. "She can," Julia assured him. "Through you, through me, through everything that's happened, because you refused to give up." The following morning, Henry boarded the corporate jet alongside Henderson, William Harrington, and Rachel. As the aircraft lifted above Haverford, Henry glimpsed the factory below, the building where he'd spent his entire career, transformed by an idea everyone had initially dismissed. Henderson noticed his contemplative expression. "Having second. Thoughts about the presentation?" "Just perspective," Henry replied. "A year ago I was worried about losing my job. Now we're flying to Chicago to present an innovation framework to the company's leadership." "Life changes direction when you least expect it," Henderson observed. "Sometimes for the worse, sometimes," he gestured around the corporate aircraft, "dramatically for the better." "The framework presentation isn't just about methodology," Harrington interjected, joining their conversation. "It's about changing how companies value different types of knowledge. Academia and business schools have dominated innovation theory for decades, often ignoring the practical wisdom accumulated by experienced workers." "You're positioning this as something larger than our company," Henry realized. Harrington nodded. "The Wallace approach has implications beyond our operations. American manufacturing has struggled partly because we stopped listening to the people who understand our processes most intimately. Your success demonstrates an alternative path forward." Rachel leaned forward from her seat. "Industry publications are already discussing the Haverford model as a potential revitalization strategy for manufacturing communities nationwide." Henry hadn't fully appreciated how far his influence had spread beyond Patriot Assembly. The idea that his practical approach might help other struggling factories and communities gave his work meaning beyond anything he'd anticipated. As the Chicago skyline appeared on the horizon, Henry reviewed his presentation notes one final time. Tomorrow he would address the company's senior leadership, not as a line worker with a desperate plan to save jobs, but as an innovation pioneer whose approach had transformed manufacturing operations across multiple facilities. The storage room prototype had evolved into something much larger, a methodology, a philosophy, perhaps even a movement. Yet at its core remained the simple principle that had guided Henry from the beginning. Practical solutions come from those who understand the work most deeply. The aircraft began its descent, bringing Henry toward the next chapter of a journey that had carried him from the factory floor to the executive boardroom, from ridicule to respect, from obscurity to influence. Whatever challenges and opportunities awaited in Chicago, he faced them with the quiet confidence of a man who had proven his worth by building something that worked when everyone said it couldn't be done. As the wheels touched down on the runway, Henry thought of Linda's favorite saying, the words that had sustained him through the darkest moments of doubt. "The people who say it can't be done shouldn't interrupt the people doing it." He had done it, not alone, but through perseverance, practical knowledge, and the courage to act when others only talked. And in doing so, he had not only saved a factory, but had begun to change how an entire industry viewed innovation itself. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.